Welcome, everyone. We are so grateful that you came to our Q&A. And our Q&A is about both the book that Roxy and I wrote together, The Anti-Racist Heart, and anything from the book, How to Have Anti-Racist Conversations, which is Roxy's own book. You'll see that I already have my little sticky notes in here for what I'm going to read at the book launch. We're very excited. And so we're so interested in anything that you're bringing today. And one of the things that's really fun is, what would you do if, so you can take those sticky, awkward moments that you've lived through and you can say, Roxy, what would you do if? And then we'll get to have stories as well as questions. So you're welcome to put Q&A in the Q&A box. There's a way to even do them as anonymous. You don't even have to have anybody know it was you who asked the question. And you're also welcome, if you don't mind being on Facebook Live and being recorded, to raise your Zoom hand and ask any questions that you have, or say, what would you do if? So we're very, very happy to be here with you. Roxy, do you have anything to add to what I said?
No, just a reminder again that the way to access the Q&A function on Zoom, on my screen, you can either click Q&A if you see that menu, or if you click More, you'll also see the Q&A as a sub-menu under the More. And if you click that, you'll be able to see how easy it is to ask us a question. And again, you can also just raise your hand and unmute yourself, and we're delighted to take questions. And so those of you who've done Q&As with me know I like to just jump in. But before we do that, I want to add this Q&A is about our books, which we are so excited about. How many of you on the call already have received a copy of the book? Just kind of like raise your hand and wave and give me a little dance. Yay! Several people. Look at that, holding it up. Several people have copies of our books. I am so delighted about that. It's been a dream for the longest time. And that it's actually here and it's in people's hands. The only thing remaining for me is to walk into a bookstore and see it on the shelves. So that will be my next big celebration. So wonderful about y'all having the book. So if you already have your books, that's great. You can help us amplify the books. The books are How to Have Antiracist Conversations that I wrote, and then The Anti-Racist Heart that Sarah and I wrote together. And so let everyone know about these books, put reviews about the books. We'll talk some more about that at the end. But that's it. Let's look at some of the questions. We have one person who would like to ask a live question. So go ahead, Leslie.
Okay, and tell me if this doesn't fit with the theme, but I have a very close friend who's in a nursing home in Amarillo, Texas. She's Black, maybe the only Black patient of probably over 100. It's a very bad nursing home, and I've been helping her for many years remotely from California. And I'd like to talk to the doctors and director of nursing and social worker about, I think she's being gaslit, I think she's being abused, etc. And I'd like help talking to the staff and the so-called professionals that work there that are neglecting and abusing her. And I'm assuming there's racism. And I'm not, but I can't prove it. I'm not there. I haven't observed their conversation. I've just heard about it from her.
Yeah, this is a really tough one, Leslie. So first, I just want to say, like, your worry for your friend must be immense. And I could imagine how much you're wanting to protect her and have her being in a setting, in a situation where she feels treasured and supported and not hurt.
Yes.
So I just want to acknowledge that. There are a couple of things that are coming up for me, and it's really challenging, this one. So the first is, I think this is a case where it would be really beneficial to get an advocate who can go in and see what's happening, right? So if you can find anyone in that community, if you can call different organizations, elder care organizations, and see if someone can go in and see what's happening. And there are a couple of reasons for this. I don't know what your friend's mental capacity is. And I do know that having worked in aging and elder care as a psychologist, that sometimes the things that people tell me don't actually match reality, that it might be part of a dementia process. And so I would want to like do some sort of assessment just to be able to ascertain what's the observation, what's actually happening. But
Yeah,
let's
she
assume that
had,
it's right. So I'm going to say, let's assume it's true that it actually is happening.
yeah,
Then I think you'll also need to get, because you're not there, because you're not on the ground, you're going to need somebody who can actually be there and advocate for you. I think it's going to be really difficult to have these kinds of conversations from afar. That said, calling and letting them know that someone's paying attention, that someone's taking her complaint seriously, and that you're going to be checking in on her, that you're going to be contacting people to come in and see what's happening might actually have an impact. So, you know, try, speak up, talk with them, let them know these are the 3 things that she's telling me. I'm going to call back next week and see if it's changed, see what measures you've put into place. And at the same time, you need to get somebody into that facility who has the power to have an impact.
thank you.
You're welcome. And I'm so sorry again that this is happening.
Thank you.
Sarah, do you want to?
Sure, I'll start on the next one, and then you can come in, because this is, of course, brings the beauty of your work very far forward. How would you intervene if you see a stranger harassing another stranger for their race or sexual orientation? So there are 2 levels of choice here. And one is, checking in for consent with the person who's receiving the harassment to make sure that it's okay with them, that they would enjoy a little support or a little solidarity in this experience, because there might be things at stake that we don't even know about. Another thing that I like to hold as very important is that when someone is harassing someone else for their race or sexual orientation or for any other reason, that's having an impact on me as well as having an impact on the person who's receiving the harassment. So one of the things that I'll tend to do sometimes is to make it about me, like not about the person who's receiving it. Because so for example, I had a friend who was doing a sexual harassment of another person in front of me. And I was like, hey, this is making me really uncomfortable. And my friend said, oh, she doesn't mind. She knows I'm kidding. And I said, I don't care what she knows. We're talking about me being really uncomfortable over here. And the person is like looking at me from behind the person's shoulder going, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. So I was also getting like nonverbal consent. But when we have nonverbal consent and we can make it about ourselves, it stays really clean. We're not coming into, and we're not triangulating or saying that we're sticking up for somebody else. We're sticking up for the world that we want to live in. But Roxy has some really clear recommendations in these cases. Roxy,
Well,
can we open?
yeah, Sarah, thank you. I want to like really lift up this piece that you said, because I think it's something that's often dropped, which is to make it about you if you intervene. Because a lot of times we're uncomfortable and we don't quite know what to say, so we focus on the other person. I want this to stop so they feel safe. And that person might have had a lot of really good reasons for not speaking up. Reasons around like, if I speak up, am I going to become a bigger target for this person? Does this person have any structural power over me? And my speaking up will put me at risk of losing my job or anything else. So when you keep the focus on you, you help to manage some of the risk to the receiver about the kind of harassment that they're experiencing. And so then part of the question is like, it's a stranger harassing another stranger, right? And there are a number of things that you can do. I want to start off by saying that some of these situations are scary. I remember here in the Bay Area, there had been some girls who were being harassed, girls who were wearing Muslim headgear who were being harassed on the train, and the person who intervened was stabbed. So I don't want to minimize the kind of danger we're talking about when we step in to try to intervene in some of these situations. And And one of the things I always say is, oh my gosh, I still can't imagine how important it is for those girls who were being harassed to realize that somebody was willing to stand up and intervene on their behalf. Somebody was willing to take on some of that risk, that they weren't alone. And so this is one of the things that folks who want to be allies can do. Part of the benefit you get of privilege is you can walk away, you can be safe, whereas those girls can't. And so acknowledge the risk and ask yourself, is this risk that I am able to take on in this moment? There's some very real important reasons why you might say no, right? It's like, I have children. I can't afford to be stabbed as a single person and leave my kids alone, right? That's a real thing also, and I don't want to minimize that. But if you can show up, if you can take on some of that risk, do so. And so how can you do that? There are a couple of things. One of my favorite ones is to kind of be the clueless bystander. Okay. So if somebody's harassing somebody, find something bizarre and innocuous about the harasser and engage with them about it. It's like, dude, is that the newest iPhone? Really? Can you tell me about it? Is that the 13 or the 14? And you just pretend you're completely ignoring what they're doing, but your goal is to get the attention away from what they're doing. And even in that moment where they're going what? What are you talking about? The receiver has a chance to escape, right? So create a distraction, something that will take attention away from the receiver and create that opportunity for the person to escape. This minimizes the risk to yourself because you're not confronting them about the behavior. You're just helping to shift the energy, shift the focus. So that's one strategy you can do. The other is to just be really clear. That is not okay. You need to stop right now. Ask for exactly the behavior you want to have. Let's talk about this instead. Let's change the subject. I'd rather talk to you about this. But a really direct intervention can sometimes actually have a huge impact. So those are two of the things that I would try doing when possible. If you're with other people, see if you can separate the people, kind of bodily get folks so that some people are taking the receiver and going around the receiver. Some folks are going with the actor so that there's now a physical distance and separation between the two. Also gives the receiver a chance to escape and an opportunity for folks to assess, is there more that that person needs? So I'm wondering if this gives you a couple of ideas on what you might do in situations like this.
And that was from an anonymous participant, so they might.
Yeah, so you can just put that in the chat. That's not showing up on Facebook Live. And I saw some thumbs up for folks on the call. Yay.
Mhm.
So the next question, if I look at that one, Sarah, and I just want to remind everyone again, this is a Q&A, so we'll keep talking as long as you have questions. So start queuing up those questions. You can add it to the Q&A list, or you can raise your electronic hand so that we know you want to be in the stack. The next question is, how do you handle a situation where you feel like you're being racially profiled when shopping at certain stores? Depends on how bold you feel, right? Really depends on how bold you feel. If I'm not feeling bold at all, I get to leave. I get to take my business elsewhere, right? I can just say, this is not worth it to me, and just walk out. And then later you can send a message to the manager to the store and say, I was shopping at your store on Thursday, blah, blah, blah. This person followed me around for 5 minutes. I left. I took my business elsewhere, and I'm going to let everyone in my community know about what happened. So give them that kind of feedback. Leaving helps you. Giving the feedback also helps the community. If you're feeling really bold, if you're trusting your safety, you can just stop and talk to the person. Hi, I noticed that since I've walked into the store, you've been behind me in every aisle I've gone into. Is there a reason? Is there something you're concerned about? And directly ask them. I'm not being obnoxious. I'm just kind of saying, I know what you're doing. And if there's a reason, tell me. If not, stop. I'm okay. I don't need help. And I feel uncomfortable shopping when you do this. And if you continue, I will leave and let our community know what's happening. So different levels of engaging. If you don't want to engage with that person, go to the counter and ask for the manager and say to the manager, your security guard has been following me around for the last 5 minutes. Is this the experience that you want shoppers in your store to have? And if it is, could you explain why they're choosing to follow me? So you can engage with the manager rather than the security guard if you're not feeling safe. But part of it is what I love about our books, that we're really talking about not being nice, not being gentle, not going for that positive piece, but being fierce, calling out things, talking about it, but in ways that are not demonizing anyone. Is that helpful, or is anything else coming up around that? I see some nods. Yeah, awesome. So, anyone else? Any other new questions?
Here's a new question.
Oh, mhm.
A family member, an anonymous question. A family member whom I love is an ultra conservative who says things that make me uncomfortable. Is there a way to talk with them? I know I will not be able to change their mind. So I'll take a start on this and then turn it over to Roxy. This is one of the places where nonviolent communication can be amazing. I remember I was having could it have been my windows? Maybe my windows were being replaced. And one of the fellows there, it was back in 2008, I think, I think in, and the fellow was talking about Pizzagate. He was talking about this whole Hillary Clinton thing, and he was talking about um, how he was completely appalled by her, and that she was really evil. I mean, it was it was very much the beginning of, I didn't even know what QAnon was at that point, right? But it was the beginning of QAnon, and I was stunned, first of all. And then I started to kind of look at him, to see his eyes, to see, that he was, that he was there, that he was trying really hard, even though the things that he was saying were, quite frankly, appalling. And so I started to guess needs for him, to find the places where our values converged. You often have to go pretty far into the roots of your needs to find these places where they converge. But certainly we had a shared love of integrity. Certainly we had a shared love of the safety of children. And sometimes that can have a surprising sweetness. Roxy, what kinds of things are you thinking of?
Well, absolutely. I think this is another one of those places. Like when I hear that question, I'm also hearing it as maybe, well, actually, it doesn't have to read that way. I was thinking that maybe you're a person who is white, for instance, hearing a family member talk about these like really racist things. It's been part of the rhetoric, but it doesn't have to read that way. One of the things I can say is that if they're not talking about you, an identity that you have, this is one of the places where you can show up as an ally, where you can start to engage with what is driving this behavior, what needs this person trying to meet by voicing this rhetoric, and both hearing them and then also gently contesting them. Even when you say that I'm not going to be able to change their mind, I think what you can do is let them know why it's hard for you to hear this, why it's uncomfortable, why it doesn't align with your values. And you could make a different request about how they are around you, around the people that you love. And by making that request, you're also in some ways putting yourself and then putting everyone else who you're holding on the table. They might not change their mind, but they might realize, oh, this is not okay in this setting with this person. And that's starting to create a little window where they can acknowledge, oh, what I'm saying has an impact. And it's an impact on somebody that I also love, and I don't want to have that impact. And once they start recognizing that people I love are hurt by the things I'm saying, it opens the door for them to recognize even people that I don't love, people who are not part of my community, might be hurt by the things I'm saying. But really lean heavily into the relationship, into both the capacity to understand and help them find different strategies to meet the needs that they're trying to meet, and then to also see the impact that it's having on you.
There's something.
Ooh,
Oh, go ahead, Roxy, you found something.
right. There's another question in the chat and looks like a juicy one. So I'm going to look at this next question. So this was oh, As a parent, this one is already breaking my heart. So this question is, a friend described a scenario to me that happened 5 years ago. She was in a restaurant, and a small Somali boy went over to a nearby table and started interacting with, possibly teasing, another child who was white. The mother of the white child stood up and started haranguing the whole table of the Somali family who was trying to eat dinner. She said things like their child was out of control and other very judgmental things. The Somali family left the restaurant, and the white woman addressed the rest of the restaurant, saying one more racist thing, and then nodded as if satisfied. My friend had no idea of what she could have done. Any thoughts? And the person who's asking this question says that they would love to have a plan if they were to see such a thing happen in front of them. For instance, going up to the Somali family and apologizing to them, or maybe telling the white woman to stop, even though you're doubting it might have been effective. Ooh. So as a parent, I'm sure there were times when my kids who were like full of energy and full of life and really curious about people might have gone up to another table, right? And said hi, started talking to people. I see this happening all the times in restaurants. So this situation is a little complicated because the scenario also says perhaps the child was teasing and in some ways hurting the other child, the white family's child. Um, but even then, I forgot to put my phone into do not disturb, and my child is trying to reach me. Turn on do not disturb. And I'm also going to take one moment because I am a parent and my child has been sick. So I'm going to tell their brother to call them and make sure they're okay. Okay, I'm back parenting in the middle of working. Um, so what comes up for me is imagining that the parent was really initially responding out of a desire to protect her child and did it in a way that was incredibly painful and hard. And the person who asked this question said, what could I have done? And maybe that would have been the first thing. I might not have been able to, anything that I said in that moment would probably not have landed for this white parent who is in this kind of flight, fight, protect kind of, I really need to protect my child and they're being harmed and I'm in mama bear mode. But maybe going over and acknowledging, wow, are you wanting your child to be safe? Oh, I think he's okay now. I wonder if your son is feeling scared in this moment. Let's look at him. Is he feeling okay? Like helping her refocus on her child and what her child needs would take her attention away from the other family. So that would be one of the things that I did, was to try to really focus on, oh, let me look at your son. He seems to be okay. Are you okay? Does he need anything? Is there any way that I can support him? Right? So it's again that kind of distracting and refocusing. If she continued to harass the other family, I would have said something like, wow, I really get that you want your child to be safe, and I want every child to be safe. Could we focus, like, could we separate and make sure that we can bring this down a notch so that every person in this restaurant feels safe in this moment? Because I imagine your son is really confused and this other child, and really focus on child. Because one of the things we know about racism is that people look at children of the global majority and they read them as older than they are, read them as more responsible than they are, right? So really noticing, like calling out, this is a 5-year-old. I want all the children in this restaurant to be safe. And I'm worried that this is not happening in the moment. How can I help? So showing myself up as somebody who's trying to help and then still focusing, these are children, let's keep it down. If I was sitting with somebody, I would do that kind of dividing piece that I talked about, right? So having someone make sure that they were attending to what that Somali family needed, that your child is fine. Your child was doing nothing that other children didn't do. I'm so sorry that this happened. And having someone be with the white family so that they were also not getting reactivated, because that's one of the things that happened. Why are they getting all the care? I'm alone. I'm the one who is harmed. So if we have enough resources, making sure both folks feel supported to basically lower the temperature of what's happening in that moment. One other thing that I'd want to say though about this is the Somali family, if this had happened, and especially if you're also a white person, would have very little reason to trust you. right? It's like they're kind of going, whoa, we were just attacked. And now you're coming up to us. Why would we think that you're not another person coming to attack us, another person coming to pile stuff on us? And so if they were wanting to leave, if anything else was going on for them, give them the space to leave. Let them do what they need to take care of themselves. You can make the offer to support, but I really want people to trust and lean into honoring what people say that they need. If they say, nope, I don't need your help, that's fine. They get to make that choice. And I know we're answering questions. I want to really also open up for both Sarah to add anything here. But if anybody else had wanted to riff off any of these questions, feel free to do that as well.
Mhm. Yeah. So and just acknowledging everything that Roxy has said, and the there's even a value in verbally not knowing what to do, and wondering aloud, and talking about the things that we're torn about. Like, if you can't figure out how to get over there and do the kind of socially graceful stuff that Roxy is describing, another option is to stand up and say very loudly, I am very worried about what is happening in this restaurant. I feel very protective for both parties. I don't want anyone to feel unwelcome. We get to do strange, awkward things when we can't do the graceful thing. We get to speak and just be our own selves aloud in public, which is a very strange thing to do, but sometimes has surprising outcomes that can be positive.
Absolutely.
It's something different than the silence, which seems like support of the white person. Yeah.
That's a really important point, because when we are silent, when we do nothing, we kind of tell ourselves, I don't want to make it worse. But what it can often land as, especially for the Somali family in this situation, is that everybody else agrees with what is happening. Everybody else is on the side of this person.
Yeah.
And there's this further um, amplification of the aloneness in these moments that could happen. I see a raised hand. Do we want to take a live question?
Sure. And then there's another question in the chat for us after that.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I had another idea on this scenario, which sounds very challenging, however you look at it, So I used to work with young children and used a lot of MVC and empathy and so on. And so let's suppose I'm there and I'm aware that the child, most likely in a scenario like that, my guess is a child wouldn't be hurting another child. They're just being playful. They're trying to connect. That's most likely what was happening, but maybe, it was just annoying or a little bit too, whatever, uncomfortable, let's say for the Somali family, or for the, let's see, it was a Somali child, for the child, we don't really know, but let's say, so I might even go up to the child and say, oh, are you really wanting to play right now? Are you looking for a friend or something like that, to again just distract, or whatever. And I have all kinds of things that I've done in the park. I might say, oh, well, I have something, if I did, that you might be interested in. And so it's a way to kind of look at the need for the child to probably have connection and fun, and maybe they were bored and, whatever. And but I'd have to be very fast because it sounded like this thing escalated pretty rapidly. But I could still consider that, and in a gentle way, and maybe getting down at the child's level, which is not threatening to children, and also would show the Somali family that I was really trying to be helpful with the child. So I wonder what you think about that.
Absolutely. If you have the capacity to jump in and actually intervene and connect with the other child, distract him away from that table where he's not welcomed, that's also really supportive for both the family and for both sets of families. It's always a tricky one though, because we live in such a horrendous time where, another adult that I don't know talking to my child could also be read as a threat. So it becomes really complicated. So that's definitely one of the things that I would consider doing. I love this idea. Um, and as I heard you, I just wanted to name something, because there's a way that when we talk about this, it's so easy to attribute positive intent, this kind of protective goodwill to the mom who responded with such hatred, really.
Mhm.
And I also want to acknowledge that when you said, like, oh, that child might have just been wanting to connect, I also want to name that there are white families who are like, I don't want a black child talking to my child. And just the fact that a black child walked up to my table is seen as an attack, is seen as a threat, is something that I have to, reject with a lot of force. And so there's also that level that I wanted to at least bring into the room, that we don't know where this mom was coming from. The child might have done absolutely nothing and still have been met with this kind of vituperous rage. Mm.
Oh, thank you very much, Corey. It's lovely to hear your voice. And our next question is, an anonymous participant writes, I'm part of the Asian American or Pacific Islander ancestry community. I feel like there are parallel struggles between the AAPI and Black community, but we are pitted against each other. Are there actions I can take as an individual to find common interest and build support? Are
Did I
you?
take?
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think for this one, oh my gosh, yes. This is like one of the things that drives me crazy about how effective white supremacy thinking and practices are, right? To be able to take groups who should be allied and divide us, pit us against each other, and foment like unnecessary division. So I think one of the first things that we can do is to really start to challenge the narrative when we see it. I know, for instance, in New York City, I went to a high school. There's a series of high schools for people who are, quote, are identified as gifted, and you have to take a test to get into these high schools. And for a long time, everyone knew that these tests were disproportionately impacting Black and Latino students who were not getting into these programs. Not necessarily because they were not smart, but there were a lot of other systemic reasons that made it hard for them to pass the test. And when people started saying, let's get away from this kind of testing, somehow the Asian community were like, no, this is our children's chance of success. And if they studied, if they did all the things we do, they would be able to pass the test. So it became this pitting against the Black and Latino families and the Asian families around whether or not this test was serving anyone. And it completely bypassed the question, why do we need a test to make sure that all of our children have access to quality education? It's like we're going to fight over the crumbs for I don't know, over the course of the city. Maybe there are like 2,400 seats in these schools. We're fighting over these 2,400 seats instead of demanding that the millions of children in New York City had quality education. And so it's helping people to start to question and look at, what exactly are we arguing about? Where are we fighting about this and why? And why are we playing the zero sum game? So I think that's one of the really big things that we can do, is to pull back and question the narratives around whether or not this is really us against them, and what's the bigger, like, who's really benefiting from this struggle. If you're able to look at that, articulate it, name it, and then people from each side to take steps into saying, I actually see you, my brother, my sister, and I see that we're having the same struggles and we're aligned, and here are the shared needs I see us trying to meet, and then come up with strategies. Stay in the dialogue so that we find strategies that really work for both groups, that acknowledges some of the lived differences in both groups, rather than tries to hide them or pretend that they don't exist. So that would be some of the things that I would do. It's really showing up in support of initiatives that members of other communities are doing. So you're in the Asian community, in the AAPI community, show up for the meetings that the Black communities are putting on, show up for the struggles that the Black community are are raising awareness about, and invite them to show up for yours. Continue to stand up and show up aligned with each other rather than only going to yours, only going to theirs, and then continuing to sense we're divided.
Thank you very much, Roxy. And Marcia has raised a hand here. Marcia, please.
Comment on that on that situation. I'm Japanese American Sansei, third generation. My grandparents came from Japan, and I live in a mountain community, so I have had the experience of when and there's more, but there's not very many African American families living in the community. But once I was at the gas station and there was a tourist and we looked at each other and it was like sisters. And then I was in San Francisco at a gas station and I inadvertently cut in front of a woman who was African American, and she looked at me and I thought, oh, she probably thinks I'm a crazy Asian driver. And so I apologized and said, I'm really sorry, I didn't see you. I had my mind on something else, and that was okay. But I guess what I'm saying, it's kind of like sometimes being Asian American, I sometimes feel like I'm in the middle. Depending on where I am, I'm seen as white or black.
Right.
And so that sometimes I think that that can be used as a bridge. The part that I get tired of being a bridge is if I'm at a training and the people who identify as white, Caucasian, European, American always come and immediately talk to me. So I have a hard time connecting with other people. Because I'm lighter, and so that's my assumption. They feel more comfortable with me. But kind of being that bridge, and what comes to mind is, in those situations where you're going, and it's not just and it's and global majority meets global minority, is that being Asian American, I can be a bridge.
Well, I'm curious, are you open to a little bit of coaching or checking in around this?
Yes, because some of this this is just something that just, kind of came as I was talking. Yes, Roxy.
Yeah. So one of the things that you said, and I think it's part of the kind of subtle ways that this comes up, is you had said, when I cut in front of this other driver, I thought maybe she thinks I'm a crazy American driver, a crazy Asian driver,
Yeah.
right? And it's just kind of like subtle ways that we both internalize or are aware of the stereotypes people have about our groups, and then we project them on other people. Like, they're now thinking that of me. And there's something so important about being able to understand where we ourselves might be holding this, and in some ways pushing people into these narratives that they must think this of me, so I'm going to act as if they are. And now they're going to respond to me, not because they were necessarily thinking that, but because I'm responding to them in that way, right? So we almost can do things that engender the kind of behavior that we're very much concerned about having ourselves. So that's one of the things that really popped out as I heard you speak.
Oh no, thank you. Because it's like it was in the Bay Area. It was Oakland. It was evening, and it's this woman could have had an incredibly busy, stressed day and needed to get gas in the car. Absolutely, Roxy. Yeah,
right.
Yeah. Thank you.
And then the other piece that I would say is, it's such an interesting, the identity of the Asian community in the United States, with this kind of sense of at some levels, we want you to be seen as white so that we can do this division, right? There was a very concerted effort around this whole, for instance, quote, white adjacent, that whole, whatever that identity means, but it's a concerted effort to continue those divisions. So like, oh, sometimes I will see you as white or as adjacent to white so that we can talk about and put down folks who are darker brown, etc. And then you're still not really white. So we're not going to really accept you. There's so much complexity about all of this.
Yes.
And so I would even like take yourself out of the idea of being a bridge, because you're still putting yourself in you're not a global majority. You're bridging these two communities. You are a member of the global majority. You are impacted by racism. And so just holding yourself
Yeah.
as, I can be someone who can speak up about my experiences and who can connect with white folks and let them understand some of the impacts that I've been having. And at the same time, when I hear you say bridge, I'm also hearing you wanting to acknowledge some of the kind of weird privileges that you might receive for being
Oh, I
lighter skinned.
do. I
Yeah, so I'm
do.
hearing the whole complexity of
I
that.
do. I do. And one of the things that I realized in the past few years is my parents are politically liberal in a Japanese American community that was politically conservative. So my after school friends were white middle class children. So I picked up a lot of nonverbal mannerisms that make people feel, that I can move in certain circles and people feel more comfortable with me because my body mannerisms are more like theirs. But anyway,
Yeah, thank
it's
you.
subtle. I don't know exactly what I'm doing, but that's what I have a sense is what's going on.
Yeah, I'd say none of us know what we're doing, but we're just showing up and trying. Thank you.
Thank you, Roxy. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Marcia. I think this next question is for me, Roxy, or to start with at any rate. Are there ways to practice so that we are less likely to go into freeze? I guess one way to start might be to release contracts that we have to not rock the boat. I just wish I could have some confidence that I could actually show up. There are two directions to go here. One is indeed to do some work with the unconscious contracts. It might be, not to rock the boat. It might also be something like, I will not believe that my voice matters. I will not I will not believe that I could ever say things right. Um, I will never be good enough. This leaves us perennially practicing instead of being able to move into expression. So that's one of the tracks, is to be able to release some of those contracts. But the other track is to acknowledge that we live in a world that doesn't have much modeling of the kind that Roxy offers us, especially, and that her beautiful book, How to Have Antiracist Conversations, offers us. And so there are models here it's almost like for the first time, there are models written down in a book that we're not going to lose, that we can keep referencing and say, oh yeah, I could say that. And then of course, you use the beautiful word practice, which you can do in the classes, in Roxy's microaggression classes, and in the classes that Roxy and I teach together, to begin to look at these questions and to play with them so that you get practice. I mean, where else do we get to practice without the possible cost of great losses and shame and humiliation? So it's nice to get the practice time in with a good model in order to be able to move forward. Roxy, what do you have to add here?
Yeah, no, I think this piece about practice is really important, that there's a lot of really good reasons we freeze. It feels really fraught when we're doing this in real time, and the costs feel really huge. Like, we want to get it right. We don't want to cause more harm. There's so much that goes on. So take one of those moments when you froze and then go and practice after. Take that exact same scenario and find a buddy and practice. What could I have said? Practice what my worst feared response might be if I actually said something, and how could I respond to that, to help you kind of rewire your system to recognize I actually can do it. But it really is about the practice. Yeah.
Thank you. This next one, Roxy, I'll leave to you to start.
Sure. And there's also one in the chat that has been there for a bit.
I got Cassian to put it in the Q&A. So
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Okay, so I'll do the next one then. How do you respond to a close friend of another race who is saying hateful racist things about people of their own race? Start with a heck of a lot of empathy. Because think about what that means, right? If I, as a Black person, am putting down a lot of other Black people, think about what that means. Think about the degree of pain that would lead me to do that. The hopelessness, the internalized self-hatred that would lead me to do that. And so I would start with a lot of empathy. And when I say a lot of empathy, empathy that's private. Don't empathize with them about the things that they're saying in front of the people that they're saying it about, because that's going to add more fuel to that fire. But give them some empathy and then, gently draw their awareness to, when I hear you say that all Black folks are like lazy, I'm using a stereotype, right? And I see that you're Black, I get really confused because I can imagine that you don't think this is true about yourself and that it must be really painful when you hear other people say that about you. So I'm wondering why it feels good to say that about other people. Like, how is it serving you to hold this belief? And what is it costing you? So give them some empathy and then just really do this gentle exploration with them about what's going on. Yeah. But it's one of the tragic things. And yeah, this could be an entire call around the ways that we have told people that part of the way to get ahead, and we see this a lot, if you look at any of the conservative media, there will be people from some of the groups that are being vilified, members of those groups, espousing the views. And it's part of the way that people have learned to get ahead, to find belonging, to find acceptance, to think that at least I can make sure that I'm safe, my family's safe. And it's such a tragic, tragic strategy. Anything else you want to add there?
To again, it's sort of like what I was saying about when we're a witness to something, to take it on for ourselves. And you pointed at this a bit in your answer, Roxy. You said, I feel confused, but there's also a way that, we can speak about, first of all, I want to acknowledge the complexity of this because the person who's speaking obviously, has their own lived experience of disappointment or pain or shame that might not be that sometimes feels like it's an entire continent of their own lived experience that I would have no access to. So so I like what Roxy said with the, saying I feel really confused and naming a little bit of impact, or I feel worried because because there are people I love besides you who are of this other race, and I love you both, and I don't find that to be true about the people that I personally know. Yeah, and then as Roxy said, like, do you want to say anything about the pain that's here? And of course, it always depends on the degree of closeness of the friendship. But yes, thank you, Roxy, for the direction you took us in.
Thank you. Do you want to?
I think
I'll take the next one.
Yeah.
So, one question is, I've been accused of playing the race card when I talk of my discomfort in a conversation. Am I? How do I know that I'm not misinterpreting the race card? Misinterpreting the race card accusation shuts me up. And that's what it's designed to do, right? It's designed to shut us up. It's designed to make us feel shame, to make us feel disempowered. And so part of it is, it doesn't matter if you are or not. It doesn't matter. If you can notice, like if someone is saying this to you and there's even the slightest worry inside of you, just ask yourself, what am I observing? What am I responding to? And then name that thing again. And if they say, but that's the race card, then say, well, I'm willing to have that conversation about whether or not it's the race card after we've addressed the concern that I'm bringing. So don't let that accusation derail you from the very thing that you're trying to raise awareness about. You can insist that I'm not willing to talk about anything about whether or not this is valid until I have a sense to understand what it is I'm trying to bring to you, and if we have some strategies to attend to it. And then after that, we can talk about whether or not there was something else going on here. But right now, let's look at the content of what I'm bringing. So that's what I would do. Don't let it derail you, because that is the only purpose of that comment, is to get you to shut up and move away. I'm
Right.
curious if the person,
Oh,
yeah, I'm actually curious if the person who wrote that question is willing to maybe even like add more in the chat if you don't want to come off anonymous status, just so I can see if this was resonant for you.
yeah. And maybe just to acknowledge that when one receives that that statement or accusation, that it gets really confusing, and that there can be almost a shock, like here's somebody trying to bring something that really matters to them, and they've probably worked really hard to get to a point of working themselves up to be able to express, and then to receive this is a shock to the system, and a clear message that it's going to be hard to get whatever your message was through to the other person.
Great. So I also we got a thumbs up. So I think that question is
Oh, good.
complete.
Oh, good. Okay. And then there's this question: how do you stay calm and curious when addressing instances of racism or gender discrimination? I start to get really mad about it, especially when it's family. I believe they should know better, that it's really basic stuff they should understand. Often they want to argue with me and push back.
Sorry,
Oh, did I
continue.
did I overspeak or something?
No. It was I was checking the Facebook Live to make sure there were no questions, and it started playing. Keep going.
Oh, thank goodness for the Zoom mute function. I didn't hear it at all.
Oh, okay.
First of all, I want to acknowledge the intensity of it being family, when we so would love our families to be in a state of integrity with our deepest values. We would love to have alignment in our family with our deepest values. And I think the very most important thing is to begin with a validation of our own rage, like that we're not wrong to be angry, that of course we would be angry when people we love so much are going down a different path or getting involved in watching news sources that are addictive and misleading. That there's a whole level of protest that I think is incredibly important. And since anger tends to shut families down or make them argue back and push back, it might be important to get a little bit of support just for that anger before we get into the conversation, before we go to Thanksgiving. Get some acknowledgement from a good friend who shares our values and is like, yeah, if you want to, you can imagine me right at your shoulder saying, yep, that's pretty messed up. That there is a pretty messed up statement, so that we're not alone at these family events or weddings or holidays or meals. And so that we have, because the more we feel alone, the more angry we get. But the more we have a sense of like having an entire community of folks, like all of the folks who are on this call right now, who would just be in solidarity with us, just hanging out with us and going, yeah, hard stuff. That's the kind of thing that gives us more space to breathe and more space to be responsive, more space to have that curiosity about the root needs that we can find that would bring us together. I find that once I reach for those root needs, I begin to have less of a sense of needing to vilify the people and more of a sense of differentiating, harmful views or statements that they might have or make from just them being souls, from them being people. So maybe, Cassian, if you would like to come back and say, okay, yes, but, or here's a situation or something like that, let us know if that was at all helpful. And Roxy, if there's anything else you have right there, that would be great.
Well, I really like the piece that you're naming, that I think, sometimes when we start doing this work and we start thinking we're going to do this with nonviolence, we're going to do this with compassion, we tell ourselves, and that means I can't be angry, I can't have rage. And I just want to say that if you're not feeling rage, like rage about some of the things that are happening, you're missing it, right? Like just yesterday, what happened, right? How are we not all feeling rage? How are we not ready to say, like, this system has to be dismantled, destroyed, stomped, torn into bits with all of the fervor and anger that we have, right? 3 people lost their lives. 3 more people lost their lives. And I can have rage about the legacy of racism. I can have rage about the fact that we still think AR rifles are okay for people to have. Like, there's so many things we could have rage about. And I think that this rage is really important to have and to own, and to let it fuel us and point us to what it is we're really wanting to create in the world. And so I don't want us to diminish our rage, to diminish the importance of being able to say, this is not okay, to scream, this is not okay. And for me, it's both, how do I acknowledge and honor that rage and do it in ways that it actually creates what I'm wanting in the long run, which is beloved community where we're all thriving, right? So it's an internal struggle. But let your rage show. Sometimes it needs to be seen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Cassian added some more information for us, Roxy. She writes, it's usually unconscious bias, but they
Mhm,
push back when it's pointed out to them, so it's tricky.
mhm. Yeah. The challenge with unconscious bias is that there's always, I mean, not always, but so many times there's this beautiful, logical, plausible explanation for why the person said or did whatever they said or did. And we will never be able to prove that, no, there was actually unconscious bias operating there. But what you can say is, you know, I can imagine you had all these beautiful, wonderful, lovely reasons for saying or doing what you said or did. And I was so really impacted. It was hard for me. Here's what came up for me. And I'm wondering if we can set aside what your intentions are and look at what it's like to be impacted in this way. Look at what it's like to have these experiences that got stimulated for me when I heard you say this, to have that be part of my lived experience, or the lived experience of people that I love. Are you willing to be with me in that? So you can force them to look at the kind of larger systemic piece and the impact of it, rather than get into the, well, I didn't mean it that way argument, right?
Another possibility, though I'm sitting here thinking how hard it is for me to get my conservative family members to actually listen to me tell a story. But another thing is to begin to share discoveries about unconscious bias that you've made for yourself, to begin to normalize the concept of unconscious bias. Again, not easy in my family to tell that kind of story, but in other situations, it can be possible for me to begin to talk about ways that I discover my own unconscious bias popping out, and to begin to talk about it so that people start to think about it for themselves as well. But I just sending you lots of acknowledgement and care and tenderness, Cassian, for those moments.
And I saw, Leslie, that you wanted to do follow-up questions on the nursing home. And I'm a little bit torn, because what I'm thinking is that you need actually more concerted and like very specific information on how to support it. Like, kind of having a general Q&A isn't going to give you the kind of support that you need. Um, so I want you to get to support, and I'm just not sure that
Well,
this would be the right forum.
I might have a more general question that's
Mhm,
for everyone,
mhm.
which is, let me comment on it. So how would you bring up to someone, either professionally or a caregiving situation, that how would you bring up the racism issue
Mhm.
with someone, you know, working with someone else, if they're not aware of it, you know, in a diplomatic way?
Yeah. First, I would say diplomatic. I'm
Or
not so
not,
worried
or
about being
forget that
diplomatic, right?
part. Yeah,
Yeah,
or
let's forget
forget
that
that.
part.
Yeah.
Let's say in a direct way. And what I'm also hearing is that you want it to be effective and you don't want it to lead to more retaliation.
Yes, effective. Yes.
And so sometimes what's really helpful for me, again, is to be really, really clear on the observations. And so being able to say, I've noticed that, let's see, just a random example. I've noticed that every time the facility decides which residents get to go off-site and get support and get outings into town, even though that this facility is like 50% global majority, 95% of the people who get selected for these outings are white, or 95% of the people are people who have a lot of resources. But these are supposed to be available to everyone. And I've been tracking this over 3 different outings, and I see the same trend happening. And so I'm actually curious if you're aware of that statistic and what steps can we brainstorm together to address it, right? So being really, really sharp and clear on the observation, pointing to it, and then letting them know, like, this isn't a one-time thing. I'm noticing this pattern, and my interest is not to get into right, wrong, are you being racist or not, but how are we addressing this? What are we going to do?
Thank you.
Yeah. I also just want to name, and this isn't like, again, not necessarily specifically addressing the content that you brought, but it's content that, like you were talking specifically about a nursing home. I know a lot of parents have this challenge of, what do I do when my child is experiencing racism in school? And I'm worried that if I bring it up, if I try to address it, they now face retaliation, right? And this is part of the challenge around, I 100% believe in communication. I believe in the power of dialogue. And and I also believe that there are times when we need to bring in the big guns, right? We need to say, this is actually illegal, what's happening right now. And I'm willing to be in dialogue with you if I have a sense that it's actually being addressed. And if it's not being addressed, I'm also willing to go the legal route to like actually get the support and to get eyes on this that can say, this is supposed to be happening. Let's make it stop. And so there's a combination sometimes that we need to do to make some of these things change. Because for some folks, the folks with power, and this is part of like what we learned in the civil rights movement in the US, right? Like we can talk about it all the time and you're going to be happy talking to me about it because nothing's going to change. I'll talk to you about it till you're blue because nothing is going to change. And it's not costing me anything really to talk to you about it. I'll even hire someone whose job is to talk to you about it and make you feel like you're hearing it. And so sometimes what needs to happen to create change is that we go to that next step. We do the nonviolent action, resistance, bringing in the people who have the power to legislate and make sure that that change happens. And so as I'm hearing the things that you're talking about, as I talk to some parents, sometimes you need to go that step. And I just want to make that super clear as well.
Thank you, Roxy.
Mhm.
Aruni is very interested in this question of anger. She writes, can you talk more about the anger that comes out when having a conversation with someone who you conceive as having unconscious bias, and they say you have so much anger and others shut down with apparent shame? And so I'll start, Aruni. First of all, of course you have anger. There was just an article in, I think even today's New York Times, that said, anger, the forgotten emotion. It's like we're not supposed to have it. And in so many places you'll see that idea that anger, it isn't real, it's just covering grief. But in my experience, anger is real. We actually have a circuit in our brain entirely devoted to anger. we are supposed to be able to take action to protect our resources and to protect people we love and to protect ourselves. So one of the things that I love to do with anger is to link it to whatever it is that I love so much that it's making me furious. So if I'm angry about Supreme Court corruption, which I am, then what is it that I love so much? There's a number of things that I love so much. There's shared values. There's a kind of a whole thing about, like, hey, this country is supposed to have separations between these different areas of power. The Supreme Court is supposed to be a check and balance. What the heck happened to the check and balance? So like there's this love I have of checks and balances that gets really challenged. And so as soon as I tie into that love of real justice, then all of a sudden my voice has more tone in it than just the anger part. And when I link, and this is neurobiological, when we link our anger with our love, it's not that I'm going to go love the Supreme Court justices who have been taking bribes. This is not what I mean. What I get to love is the quality or the value that's so important to me. And that brings me so much clarity and so much power. Aruna, you're nodding just a little bit. How, you want to say anything about how you're doing, or you're doing okay?
You're muted though.
If you're willing to speak, we'd love to hear your voice.
Yes. I mean, I had this conversation, and I think part of it is I've known this person for a long time. She's white. And I'm just really realizing now that she really has some real unconscious bias. And so some of it is just the shock of, oh my God, I didn't realize you had this thought. So that may be part of where the anger comes from. And then part of me, like when she said that to me, she said, but you have so much anger when we talk about this. And what came out for me was, well, it feels like it's righteous anger, like you said, like to me, she felt like she was saying my anger is not right, but there is righteous anger, right?
Yes, and the more that we're clear about that, and the more we differentiate, I mean, it sounds like she's somebody you care about.
Yeah.
So there's also the love for her that's a part of this experience. Very complex to begin to say, I love you, I love your soul, I love your heart. What you're expressing now is not up to the standard of what I expect from you.
Right.
Yeah. So I'll let Roxy tune in here too.
No, I absolutely love this. And there is something about letting people know when someone's doing something, displaying unconscious bias that's impacting us, and like you said, you love this person, they love you, there's a lack of awareness. And so being able to be straight with them and saying, you are not showing up in the way that feels good to me for people I'm in relationship with, people who truly see me and see the impact of the systems that we're living in on me, and who are not going to be part of being part of that impact. And I want you to know that I'm telling you this because I love you and I want to be in relationship with you. Because
Okay.
people hear these messages and they think, oh, I'm now being like told that I'm bad, I'm evil, that you're not going to be my friend anymore. So it's kind of
Well,
saying, I'm telling you this because I want to be in relationship with you. Are you willing to show up and do better? Right?
well, she's not. I mean, because she's like, oh, calling me a racist, and I'm not a racist. So I don't know where to go with that then.
Ooh, can you imagine telling this person, you know what? Every time I try to talk to you about the ways that I'm impacted, the conversation becomes about your identity, whether or not you're a racist or not a racist, or etc. So I wonder if you're willing to have one conversation with me where the only thing I'm asking of you is that you listen to me and you reflect back what you think is important to me. And
Okay.
only thing I want to hear from you is, what do you hear is important to me?
Okay.
And then if you have the capacity, and this is only if you have the capacity, you can let her know. The next day or the next week, I'm willing to hear what that was like for you. But what I'm actually asking for this conversation is only that you reflect back what's important to me. And if you notice things coming up, like you're thinking, is she saying I'm racist? You don't get to tell me that. You only get to tell me, what do you hear is important to me? So you're trying
Okay.
to like pull her into focusing on what is it that you are trying to tell me, and to
Okay.
see if you can stay in that dialogue.
Okay.
In the book, I talk about this as a dialogue to be heard, where you're making it really clear to the person, I am not willing to hear you in this moment, not because I don't love you, but because I have not been heard. And I want you to stay in this dialogue and hear me and show up.
Okay. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
What a wonderful question. Thank you, Irene. And it's really fun to see, Roxy in the flow of it and get to hear it so that I can take it away from myself and kind of have that modeling, that internal.
Thank you, Sarah. So our next question is about related for age.
I'll read it. I have an ageism event. It's not about GM or race at all, I think. It's an ageism. And is this conversation limited to racism or all bias? What do you think, Roxy? Is it okay to go forward?
Well, in the absence of any other questions, I'd say let's go forward. We
Okay.
definitely would like to focus on racism, and we also don't want dead space.
Okay. So thank you for your question, anonymous participant. I am 67. I was having community garden conversations with a young woman, 25, who is the power structures liaison. She told me I might not be a fit for a community garden. The community garden courts and encourages diversity from the whole city, all welcomed. This happened in 4 minutes. Makes me think this was age-related. It was so incongruent to the conversation. We just learned from Sarah about the neurobiology of not belonging. It was very painful and shaming. I have not written my letter to the president of the community garden. What can I say? Is this a microaggression? So the first thing that I'd say is that you can take a look at Roxy's dialogues, and it sounds like the very first thing might be a dialogue to be heard by the president of the community garden, just to say, hey, this happened. I want everybody to be welcome. If everybody's welcome, how is it that there are people walking around saying you're not a fit participant? This worries me for myself. It worries me for everybody else. Before we go any further, I would like to hear back from you that you're actually understanding what I am saying here. And could you reflect my concern to me? That would be a way to use Roxy's dialogue process in writing, which can be challenging sometimes because people like to get everything done in a letter. And also, we don't know for sure the other person's going to respond to us. So sometimes we want to get it all in, because in case they don't respond, we want them to have read about all the stuff. But it's at least a place to start. Roxy, where do you go with this?
I would actually start even earlier, because what I'm seeing in this question is it was painful and shaming. And so I'm actually connected to the pain of the experience. And I can imagine that even the idea of writing a letter where you already don't have a sense of belonging, of mattering, of being valued, might feel kind of pointless. Like, what's the point? They're not going to listen to me anyway. Maybe this is part of like how this operation operates. And so the first piece might be to get some empathy, to like really have someone acknowledge your experience, acknowledge that it had impact, that in the absence of this other person knowing anything else about you and deciding in 4 minutes that you're not a fit, that it was clearly coming from some sort of external evaluation, some evaluation she was making based on external attributes. So even getting that acknowledged and seen and reflected back, getting some empathy for the pain and the fear of not having a space, not being part of this community that comes up would be the place that I start. And then once that feels a little bit less um, charged inside of you, then think about what's my purpose? What do I want to have known if I speak up, if I share anything with the president of the community garden? What am I hoping to accomplish? And then what Sarah said would make a lot of sense, right? That maybe you're wanting them to have more training. So this is, if you're going to write a letter, having a clear request on what it is you'd like at the end. Either you'd like them to meet with you to talk about what your experience was, or you might say, would you consider having more training for the people who are representing and interfacing with new people so that they're aware of how these kinds of statements land and the way that they don't foster the climate of belonging and inclusion that you're going for. So get some support first, get clarity on what is the outcome that you're looking for, and then you'll be able to know how to proceed.
I also want to touch on another element here and check with Roxy and see if we're in agreement on this. It doesn't matter if something is a microaggression or not, if it impacts us. The whole microaggression concept is incredibly helpful to begin to see patterns and to begin to notice and validate the impact that all of these everyday acts of racism and other kinds of isms impact us and harm us, because they do impact and harm our hearts, they harm our health. But what's most important is not whether or not it's a microaggression. What's most important is, was it painful? In which case it matters. And so we don't have to know. It's not like we have to know that something was definitely a microaggression and that it can be found in the Encyclopedia of Microaggressions. And look, here it is on page 67, line 32. We don't have to know that. All we have to know is, this did not work for me and I matter. And what is the next step I want to take? Roxy, where do you land on that?
Hallelujah. Yes, yes, yes. Right? Because in a way, this like idea of it has to be a microaggression for it to count is another way to silence it. Because if we argue that that's true, then you know that the minute you try to say that was a microaggression, what your response will be, no, it wasn't. Because it becomes this legitimate. It's not legitimate unless it's a microaggression. So I can silence this whole line of inquiry if I tell you it's not a microaggression. So no, just own, like, this impacted me and I wanted to stop. And then if you want to go further, you can say, and I'm worried it's impacting not just me, but many other people like me who might have that experience, right? So, but don't get caught into the, is it a microaggression? Is it not? Like, yeah, you matter. You matter just exactly for who you are. So friends, we are coming close to the end of this session, and I'm not seeing a question in the queue. Does no one have one more question to excite us? I know Sarah and I love answering questions.
And we're getting close enough to the end that we could start to harvest learnings. Like, what are you taking away from today? If you're willing to put that in, if you're not sitting with a question, what's touched you or inspired you? What are you going to be reaching for? What kind of action have Roxy and I taken you toward? Hello to Marsha.
Hi, when will be your next trainings that or retreats that both of you will be doing together based on your books?
Live or online?
Live, ideally, and also online.
We don't have a live one planned, but we were just getting together yesterday and we planned a joint one that starts in, is it late January, early February?
Yeah, the last week of January, I think, on a Wednesday in the morning.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But there's one going on right now that has three more classes in it, and you'll get the recordings of the first three if you would like to join it. And that's on Thursday in the afternoon. Yeah. And that's a very sweet training. And Roxy has more things happening between now and then with a focus on racism, where she's teaching on her own. And those classes can be found at roxannemanning.com.
Absolutely. And yes, there was a question about whether or not there would be repeats of the previous videos for these calls. And I will say, yes, we're going to upload all of those to the book's website. So if you go to antiracistconversations.com, I will have to figure out how to make past events show, but you'll be able to look at the events and click to any of the videos. Today's video, of course, I forgot to start the recording right at the beginning. So the very first question and a half, I think, was not recorded. Wow, one question is there a particular idea that you would love for everyone who reads the books to be able to integrate? Ha ha ha. I would say absolutely, probably not possible to summarize, but one of the messages that I want us to take away from this, and it's really kind of the orientation of the book, right? These are books on anti-racism, but with this lens around self-compassion, beloved community, you know, really creating a different world. And so what I want people to understand is that it is possible to be fierce, to be angry, to be real, to be direct, and to still work together, to still create a world where we're all part of this world, we're all thriving. And if I'm doing something and it's really about ejecting you from my community, I'm not doing the work of building beloved community. In some ways, and I always feel a little hesitant to say this because I also value protective use of force, but I can be part of the problem if the way that I'm protecting myself is by putting other people down, pushing other people out. I can still protect myself. I can still refuse. And I have done this to be in dialogue with people without demonizing them. Often when I refuse to be in dialogue, it's because I am mourning my lack of capacity and not that the other person is unreachable, evil, etc. It's just, I just don't have the capacity and resources to be in this dialogue. And so that's what I want people to take, that we can be fierce and real and direct and authentic and have these dialogues in ways that actually build beloved community. And I see your hand, Pam.
Yes, I thought of something when you were talking. One time, on Sunday I went to a singing thing that I go to often, and the song leader is just does these wonderful songs about working together to build a new world, and but she almost always includes one or two songs that say F the patriarchy, or some, police up yours. And I, like, this impacts me, and I don't feel like it's in integrity. And I don't want to say anything to her for the reason that one time this one nonviolence teacher said how she was at a demonstration and a bunch of young Black men were really angry, and she was so happy that they got to express that.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, like, oh my God, do I get to say that this is painful to me and not in integrity with what I'm here for? Or do I have, I respect what you're doing?
For
Or
me, there's
nothing.
actually a different question, because I'm wondering if you can actually do a different framing. And I'm going to talk about this in two parts. So the first part is when I heard you say, she says F the patriarchy,
Mhm.
I actually say that also. I say F white supremacy. Like, that's all great, because it's being able to distance, to separate out the systems, the structures from people. I am never about F that specific person, but the systems, absolutely. And so
Mhm.
there's something there about, like, can you inside of yourself check in? Like, are you actually okay with patriarchy? Is this something like, is
And
there
she does it with
any
white supremacy a lot too,
right?
which
And
I'm
so
not okay
being
with.
able to, like, translate inside of your head, what does she actually mean? Is she talking about people, or is she talking about these systems that have caused so much harm and challenge? And is there any shift inside of you in how you hear her when you think about that? So that's one piece that I would name. And then the second piece, and I'm going to say this partly because, like, you and I have had many interactions in the past, you said, this is not what I'm here for. And my question is, and I don't know who this person is at all, but this is her space. She's creating this space. So what is she there for? What is she trying to create? And whenever I think about showing up and trying to be in a space and participate in the space, it's also around, if someone says, this is the purpose of my space, I get to choose if I meet them or not. If they say, this is the purpose, and then they're showing up in ways that are not aligned with that purpose, then absolutely I get to have a conversation with them. I hear you say that your purpose is about, like sunshine and love, etc. And this doesn't match that for me. So help me understand how what you're doing is matching that purpose rather than necessarily saying that you're not living up to it. It's like, I'm actually curious to see how they're seeing this align. But if it's clear that their purpose is not my purpose, then I always tell folks that maybe I need to step back and find a different place that actually is aligned with the purpose that I'm trying to get met.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We
Steph.
have a wonderful and thank you, Pam. I love that. I love the answer, Roxy. We have a wonderful question in the chat, which in the Q&A, which is, what is the best way to buy the books? The best way to buy the books is anywhere, and then to post reviews for them
Yes.
on Goodreads and on Amazon. Even if you haven't bought on Amazon, you can post as an unverified buyer starting on Tuesday. And we'll say more about how to buy them, but we just want to say this, that because the topic is anti-racism, there are like these troll reviewers that go on and put on 1 star, and then it drags down the whole value system of like saying that our books are spectacular, which they are. And so if you can get onto Goodreads, and if you can get onto Amazon and post reviews for us, of course, we want them to be genuine. We want you to like them. We want you to give them 5 stars because you like them. Then please do, because gosh, you'll help us so much. And then I'll put in the names of the books, and then Roxy will tell people how to buy them.
Yes. So first I've just put, and I sent it to just one person by mistake. I'm putting into the link, into the chat, a link to bookshops.org. And just because I want to support my community, this is a link to Black-owned bookstores that you can find on bookshops.org. And bookshops.org is the place to go online to find an independently owned bookstore. So for those of you who are like, I don't want to support Amazon, this is a place you can search by your state. You can find the independently owned bookstore in your area and purchase the books there. And they will actually give you an option to donate some of the proceeds to that independently owned bookstore to help them thrive. So you can either click one of these Black-owned bookstores that I listed to, or you can find your local independently owned bookstore. And then these are the names of the 2 books, How to Have Antiracist Conversations and The Anti-Racist Heart. And then the last link that I'll put into the chat is links directly to those books on either of these 2 sites, so that you'll be able to find them easily on bookshop.org. So give me one quick second to do that.
And Deborah's asking, are there repeats of the previous videos? There will be. We'll post all of the recordings on YouTube, and we'll send out a link to everybody who's been registered. So if you're watching on Facebook and you want to receive emails from us, go to antiracistconversations.com and sign up for these programs for the book launch series, which is all free. And then you'll be able to get information about the recordings of the past ones. Roxy did a fabulous piece on microaggressions, and I did a beautiful thank you to everyone who came to the Unconscious Contracts presentation. It was one of the most beautiful times that I've ever gotten to do that. And then someone else has a question about transcripts, Roxy.
Yes, I generally try to make the transcripts. It takes a lot of time to edit them because I'm always surprised at how much the automatic transcriptions don't quite understand what we're talking about. So what I'll probably end up doing, just because it's so busy over the next couple of weeks, is putting the automatic transcript that won't be accurate, but it'll give you enough of the gist. And then if I have time, going back and editing it to make it clearer. And then I'll also put our last major plug for the books. What I understand, my hope is that these books go viral. It's like, I want to figure out how to leverage social media for positive viral trends. So if you have not yet bought your book, or if you're thinking about getting holiday, birthday, celebration presents for anyone in your life, doing it in the next 3 weeks makes a huge difference. We've been told that some of the ways that they look at new book sales and get on bookseller lists is if people purchase it within this very narrow window of the book's release. So if you are still waiting to get your book, or again, anticipating any celebrations that are coming up, please go ahead and buy copies of the books, give them to everyone, and support us.
I have a question about Amazon. thought you had to be a verified buyer to, sort of like to have your review have weight or something like that.
Yes and no. So there are two things that I tell folks. If you don't want to buy it on Amazon, I completely honor that. Go to goodreads.org. You don't have to buy the book or to be listed as having bought the book to leave a review there. And Amazon actually bought Goodreads. And so I've seen in the past that they are now listing two sets of ratings on the Amazon book page. There'll be, here's the Amazon review and here's the Goodreads review. So if you're not like verified on Amazon, and we've been told you can actually leave it without being verified on Amazon, but if it's not letting you do that, you can leave that review on goodreads.org.
And so you're saying that those are compiled because you're obviously trying to get into the top numbers in the first 3 weeks, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's the goal. Mm-hmm.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's odd because I want to honor like where everyone is in terms of their finances. But we've even told folks, if you already bought your copy in the Kickstarter, go buy it on Amazon also so you can leave a verified review because it helps us. It's another way to support if you have the resources to do that.
And the book's available now?
They are coming out on Tuesday. So if you ordered it today on Amazon, you will have it in your, probably you'll have it in your, how do you say, your mailbox on Tuesday.
And there are some wonderful takeaways. Nancy says, I'm taking away how much I'm looking forward to reading and working through and sharing the books. Oh, the other idea we had, folks, was make a book club. Make a good book club with your friends and get them to buy the books and read them with you and do the exercises with you. There are great exercises in the books.
And actually, if you want to do that, there's a book club called Fable that I have not set up yet. But if people say that they want to do a Fable book club, I think it's primarily online. One of the benefits of Fable is that a lot of people get to learn about the books. And I will do just let me know if you do a Fable book club and I will come and do a talk to your book club or a Q&A just for your book club. So it could be a way to get lots of people in your religious group or any sort of group that you're a member of to gather together. They can order the books if they haven't ordered it yet through Fable, and then we'll do a Fable book club for them.
And she writes, practicing, also love the examples. For example, the restaurant encounter of two families. For example, somehow let the Somali family know they and their child are welcome, connect with the child if possible, distract to lessen the impact from the actor, maybe be weird and vocal in service of protecting all.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Marcia writes, taking away feeling discomfort in my body, but not shame. Marcia, I'm really glad it's not shame. Thank you for letting us know. And I have a friend who always puts a slide at the beginning of her podcast, of her PowerPoints. It says discomfort. And then the next slide says, lean into it. And
some other takeaways.
yeah.
I took away is to speak up from Ayana, and I have a lot to learn in honoring my anger and linking it to love from Corey.
Wow, it's been lovely to be with you all. We're 2 minutes after the end time. If you'd like to come off mute and say goodbye, we'd love to hear your voices.
Buy the book. They are brilliant.
Thank you.
Great idea. Bye, guys.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Thank you.